Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this webinar today. My name is Maria Virginia Olano. I am Editorial and Research Associate at Canary Media. If you don't know us, we are an independent nonprofit media outlet that covers solutions to the climate crisis and the clean energy transition. If you're interested in following our work, please visit our website. It is canarymedia.com. You can sign up for a newsletter to make sure you never miss this story. I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel today with three incredibly inspiring leaders working on community-led energy projects. And this conversation is part of a special week of coverage here at Canary Media. We are focused on telling the stories of people and communities who are taking charge of their own energy future and ensuring equitable access to clean energy for all. So I definitely encourage you after this webinar to go to our site and visit the Powered by the People series page, where you can read more about the people we're going to learn about today, but also many others working across the US. To bring clean energy to their communities. So before we get started, I also want to remind you all that this conversation will be recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch it on our site. And we want to answer some audience questions. So if you do have any questions at any point, please put them in the chat box right here, and we'll try and get to them towards the end of the call. But without further ado, let's turn to our panel. We are so grateful to be joined by Yesenia Rivera, who is Executive Director at Solstice Initiative, Chéri Smith, who is the founder and CEO at Indigenized Energy Initiative, and Arturo Massol-Deyá, Executive Director at Casa Pueblo de Adjuntas in Puerto Rico. So hi all, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I'd love to go around and have you introduce yourselves and a little bit of what you do. Could you start us off, Yesenia?
Sure. Yesenia Rivera, as you mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Solstice Initiative. We are a nonprofit focused on revolutionizing our energy system. But we do this centered on communities with policy, advocacy, education, and community-based community solar.
Awesome. Chéri, why don't you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Hello, my name is Chéri Smith. I am founder and CEO of Indigenized Energy Initiative, soon to be called Indigenous Energy Initiative for reasons I can explain another time. Our organization is a Native-led nonprofit, and we are focused on harnessing the power of renewable energy as a means towards the restoration of self-determination in Indigenous communities in our country and beyond.
Awesome. Arturo, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. I am Arturo Massol from Casa Pueblo in Puerto Rico, U.S. territory, a colonial land of the U.S. So since 1980, we have been defending the land from mining, from a natural gas pipeline, but also proposing alternative and assuming the responsibilities of those proposals, like managing state land, promoting school educational programs inside the forest. We have a radio station, a butterfly garden, a solar cinema, and we have been promoting energy independence for the community as an alternative model for local development.
Amazing. I would love to hear about what were some of the problems that your organizations were trying to address when they started, and we can go in that same order.
So we were founded by Steph Spears and Sonia Murali over 8 years ago. And at that time, Steph had been working abroad, trying to address energy issues in Asia, and realized there's a lot of work that can be done and has to be done at home. So she came back stateside and partnered with Sonia to help address the barriers to clean energy, particularly through community solar. Why? Because community solar is supposed to be this democratized form of energy. Everybody's supposed to be able to access, regardless of your home ownership status. It's supposed to be easier to access community solar, cheaper to access than rooftop. But that's not what we were seeing at the time. And even now, I think 4 out of 5 low-income households cannot access rooftop solar. but there are still too many barriers to community solar itself. So our mission is to help communities develop these community solar projects and give them a voice in addressing their clean energy needs and demanding change, because they're the ones most impacted by these disasters and by climate change.
Chéri? Mm-hmm.
So I actually worked with Steph and Sandia and crew at Solstice for a little while. I had the honor of doing that a few years back, and the work that you all are doing is so needed. And for the reasons that Yesenia just described, in Indian country, in the plains states of our country, especially, if I asked you to imagine a place where 40% of people live without electricity and more than 90% live below the poverty line and the unemployment rate exceeds 80%, you might picture an isolated village in a developing country. But in fact, those statistics apply to that region and other Native American communities within the United States and territories. And there's over 1 million people that reside on Indian reservations, and they're often referred to as the third world of America. And that's there's poverty there that we call energy-induced poverty. The tribes of the Plain States and beyond are among the poorest, most socially disadvantaged people in North America. Broken treaties, forced assimilation, and the lack of any tangible economy since the deliberate extermination of the buffalo by colonists have all taken their toll on these tribes. And their unemployment rates are extremely high, and poverty is real. And compounding that issue is that in the states, utility companies aren't closely regulated and aren't penalized for the common practice of charging double or more what the non-native people for the same electrons are charged, or for turning off electricity to families when they've fallen behind on their bills, in even homes that shelter elders, the sick, or the young. And this is particularly problematic during harsh winters on the plains, when people in Indian country often resort to burning things indoors to keep warm. Wood is scarce and expensive, so people burn anything they can find: furniture, trash, tires. And when they run out of things to burn, they die of exposure to cold in their own homes. And this is happening in 2022, right here in America. This isn't, happened 100 years ago. This is going on right now. So knowing this, you might be astonished to learn that tribes are resisting fossil fuel development despite the promised riches and promised economic development, in favor of pursuing clean energy as a means to take control of their energy systems and their economies, create well-paying jobs for tribal members, doing a job that is in line with Native lifeways and ethos right in their own communities, and recirculating all of that money that was spent on energy back into the community. And when you, as Yesenia was talking about access to clean energy, when you take a home that's impacted by poverty and you take away that a chunk of that electric bill, these folks aren't using those savings to buy, fancy purses and lavish trips. They're using it to buy food and clothing and medicine. So it's solar and renewables in general are an incredible lever, but it's essential that this is done. And Jeff asked me, I'm like, power by the people. Exactly right. It has to be done by Native people for Native people, or else it's just as extractive.
Actually, Chéri, you can be a Casa Pueblo's spokesperson. And with Yesenia, I think we share pretty much the same challenges. Initially, Casa Pueblo got organized to confront an open street mining proposal by multinationals and endorsed by the government. So it was founded by my parents, Alexis Massol and Massol-Deyá, and other members of the community. But we quickly realized that protesting was not enough, and we needed to engage in building up from the bottom up our own solutions. In the case of Puerto Rico, it's about breaking the model of dependency as a colonial state in order to pursue means for self-determination, you have to break dependency. And one of that is the fossil fuel dominant centralized system in Puerto Rico. And in 1999, we decided to set up our first solar installation. And we have been quickly evolving and adapting to that technology. And with the solidarity of many, it's not about the individual survival of Casa Pueblo having power before, during, and after hurricanes like Maria and Fiona and others. It's about a collective survival. So with the solidarity of people like Bill Jordan, who is actually listening from New York, we have been helping the community gain some means for energy self-sufficiency, in which the technology, the infrastructure is actually owned by the community itself. That's a critical aspect as well of what we call in Adjuntas the energy insurrection.
Absolutely. And I think something that you all have touched on and that comes up a lot when you talk about community ownership is the concept of energy democracy and energy independence. I'd love to go around and hear what that term means to each of you. Yesenia, we can start with you.
Okay, thanks. For us, energy democracy is what Arturo and Chéri say. It's about the people having a say in where their energy comes from. We have an extractive energy system, an energy system where people do not have any voice at all, and they're still paying the price for not having that voice. They're not benefiting from that energy system. They are paying way more than they need to pay for that energy because they don't have a say on where that energy comes from. If you have a say on where that energy comes from, you have a say on who gets to benefit from that energy. And that's what we want to do. That is what we're pushing for. We're pushing for communities to have a voice in how their energy is supplied and who gets to benefit from that supply. Because not only should you have a say in that, but it also helps with what Arturo was saying, energy independence. If you are constantly just following and being told this is where your energy comes from, when that power is down, then you're at their mercy. You know, when a hurricane hits, when we have winter storms, when we have wildfires, you have no say on what happens to the energy system because you've been excluded from that conversation. So energy democracy, energy independence, they go hand in hand. If we have a say in how our energy system behaves, then we have a say on how we get to benefit from that energy and how we can control those benefits. And it doesn't have to be a centralized system. We can do so much better.
Agreed. And we sort of have a tenet around here that sort of drives us in all that we do, which is how can a community, how can a nation be truly sovereign if they're dependent on outside sources for their resources? And that's the goal that we have is energy sovereignty. But we realize that there's a big delta between now and when most Native American tribes can be energy sovereign. And so we're advocating for policies that are supportive of that democracy and that seat at the table and that voice, because it's been missing. It's essential that Native people and Indigenous people and BIPOC individuals have the opportunity to speak for themselves and be at the table when decisions that affect them, especially exponentially, are being made. And so we're working towards that in the interim between now and when there truly is energy democracy for these communities.
The only thing that I want to add is that energy is the capacity to do work. Energy, if we define energy as the capacity to do work, think about the baker and at their bakery, how much bread that guy has to produce before he can enjoy a single cent of his productive activity. We have done it with the barber shop, and the barber, how many people he needed to do his work before he earns something that he can enjoy. And now that the barber is producing his own power with solar power at the point of consumption on top of his barber shop, now is the equivalent of 1.5 days of work from his monthly duty. It used to be for just for the electrical bill, and now he can enjoy in a better way. It's more fair, more just. Is by building energy freedom for the productive activities of Puerto Rico, for the community, and for everyone. So it's about building energy democracy. Is also about building means for freedom.
Yes, the solar barber and the solar pizzeria, I think, are some of my favorite projects coming out of Puerto Rico. So you all are focused on working with solar, community solar in your case, Yesenia. But I'd love to hear about what are some projects that you're currently working on that you're really excited about.
Yeah, we have two outgoing projects, one in Boston, one in Buffalo. We work with the community. In Boston's case, we're working with the East Boston community, and we have a community advisory board that's comprised of community members and small community groups representing the community. And we work with them as technical advisors. We walk them through their options, not just in terms of clean energy, but energy in general, so they can have the tools to be part of the conversation, to demand the change they should be seeing. And this summer, the community in Boston opted to go towards a community-owned community solar development, which we're incredibly excited about. And the community is just, they are all in. It's not just about building community solar so they can reduce their bill. It's like Chéri said, this is about everything. This is about creating more jobs for the community, creating wealth for the community, and putting all of that money back into the community to start building generational wealth. So they're looking at the projects like, let's not just about building community solar, but building something for the community that can be passed on through generations. In how do they add workforce development? How do we address community members that may not be able to initially afford a subscription? How do we help all of those things? And so the community is really, really excited about this project. They're currently looking at a site in East Boston because, again, they really want to focus on the community itself. So they want to build it inside the community so the benefits stay with the community. And we just started the project in Buffalo. We're working with Push Buffalo again. And we are just starting the community advisory board process. We're building that along with Push Buffalo, and we're looking forward to seeing what they decide they want. We're not a one-size-fits-all model. We know that every community is different. Every community has different needs, but we will present them with their options and make sure that their voices are heard and that they have all the tools they need to move forward.
I'm so excited to hear that you're working in my hometown and my adopted hometown, Boston and Buffalo. I'm so excited to hear that. We have to chat, Yesenia. We have several projects underway right now. Our flagship project and our longest standing relationship with the tribe is the Northern Cheyenne Tribe in southeastern Montana. And the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, they defended their homelands against the big push from Arch Coal, going back to 1973, when Arch Coal tried to swindle them out of their mineral rights, basically, and established an open cast mine and a railroad that was going to take that coal all the way through, cut a swath from the Northern Cheyenne homelands, all the way through other tribal lands to the Lummi tribe's homelands on the coast of Washington State, where that deepwater port was going to disturb sacred burial sites and transport that coal to China. It wasn't even for use here. So the Northern Cheyenne Tribe and various young activists named Vanessa Braided Hair, and now her dad, Otto Braided Hair, who's he's our cultural leader and my co-founder. They were successful in educating their tribe about the the devastation that fossil development brings in spite of these promised riches. And in 2015, the tribe signed a resolution to eschew fossil fuels forever and pursue only clean energy. And so we've been working with the tribe for years, a subset of us for over a decade. And the project, the world has changed in the last year with regard to the Department of Energy and the funding that's available. We secured a $4 million grant on behalf of the tribe going back to, 4 years ago, pre-COVID. And we're just breaking ground now because of COVID. But this project consists of 15 10-kilowatt residential systems with storage that are going at the homes of tribal elders who have medical equipment that cannot be without power. We are doing 3 small commercial sized systems that are going on a Head Start childcare facility, 1 on a water pumping facility, and 1 on a high school. And then a small utility scale array that's just under a megawatt. Depending on supply chain and what we can get, it may be a little more than that, under just a megawatt. But that one is in the shape of the Morning Star, which is the Cheyenne's symbol of Chief Morning Star, who led their people back from exile to their homelands. And so this already, just from my staff, we have 4 full-time Cheyenne tribal member employees on the ground working on the Northern Cheyenne. This group of projects alone will employ about 25 full-time tribal members who are being trained through our program in conjunction with Red Cloud Renewable down in Pine Ridge, Chief Henry Red Cloud, who is on our board. And we have already about 30 solar warriors, as we call them, trained up, and they are working in the community for solar companies as well as on this project, and will go on to work on the future projects that the tribes do. So we're excited about this one. It's been a model, and this tribe has been an inspiration to many others.
In our case, we upgraded our system in 2017 before Hurricane Maria, and we became an energy oasis. And after that point, we have been promoting, with the help from many, the transformation of our energy landscape. We have done grocery stores in rural areas for food security, homes for that are confronting medical needs. We have done critical infrastructure like the fire station, the emergency unit, the elderly home, the transmission tower of Radio Casa Pueblo, the solar cinema, the barber for economic activation. And now there's 2 main projects that are pending. One is with the Alex Honnold Foundation, is downtown at Juntas. I know he works with. So Alex, we're doing 2 microgrids in downtown at Juntas for where the pizza place is located, the pharmacy, the bakery, and others. The power generation is already installed and have been providing service since for over 1 year, over a year. But it seems, I just got a message that it seems like the energy storage component, a 1 megawatt, will be installed next month. So that will complete not only the generation and the storage and distribution part of that microgrid. The other project that we have been working for the past few months is to get organized this community, Altos de Cuba. Is a humble, historic location in marginada, zona marginada in Juntas. And we're working with them to get them organized around energy to confront other issues within the community. Solar lighting for the streets have been designed, will be installed soon. The grocery store will be running on solar power, which is sort of the main facility for the community. And with Let's Share the Sun, we're hoping to do all 30 houses to run with solar power and storage as well. So this is under development, and hopefully by March or April of next year, all of these projects will be a reality in our community.
Incredible. And it sounds like all of you have your hands full, which is great news. So we've heard from all of you the upside of clean energy, whether it be resiliency from natural disasters and storms, or cheaper energy prices, or public health from not burning fossil fuels. I'm curious to hear what, if any, pushback or challenges and obstacles have you faced when engaging communities towards these kind of projects?
Say from the community aspect itself, I don't think it's the community that's been the roadblock towards adopting clean energy. Whenever we do talk with the communities we engage with, they are sometimes the ones seeking us out. They come to us because they heard what we are doing. They are interested in adopting clean energy. They want to see change. I think for frontline communities, BIPOC communities, we already know the consequences of our extractive centralized system. We know the price we pay for that system, and we know that it needs to change. I think what I've seen in the years I've been doing this, it's not the community that doesn't want clean energy. It's outside players that are keeping them from accessing clean energy. It's the utility companies putting on roadblocks, whether it is interconnection or posting community solar. Like, to this day, even with the IRA, not every state in this country allows for community solar. That is a big problem, because if you are not a homeowner, if you don't have a decent enough roof, how are you supposed to access clean energy when your state is saying, no, you can't access community solar? You're going to have to figure out a way to build this on your own roof, or figure out a way to own a roof so that you can install solar and get clean energy. And when 35-40% of the country is renting, when the majority of those renters are low to moderate income families that cannot access rooftop solar, how are we supposed to have a just transition? How are we supposed to revolutionize our system if our policymakers and our utilities are blocking every step of the way and not making it easier for folks to access the clean energy that they want? Because it's not a matter of whether or not the community wants this. The community wants this. They've seen what happens with a centralized system. They've seen what happens when that grid goes down. And they've seen the impact that has on their bills, on their home lives. Everything is connected for them. They want this clean energy. They want to start making change to their communities in terms of better livelihoods, better environments, and more money in their pockets. So it's not the community that's opposing the transition.
Yesenia is spot on. Our org is very closely working with the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, and we're going to talk about the IRA. I know Maria Virginia in the next question, so I won't discuss details here. But in Washington last week at the Tribal Clean Energy Summit, I spoke to the department, the legislators, the senior government officials, and said, this money that's flowing now is great, but you have exactly what Yesenia described, which is a roadblock. It's policy needs to change, and it's done in clandestine, colonial boardrooms. These decisions are made, and they impact tribal members, and they impact marginalized communities, frontline communities, BIPOC communities the most. And so you can pump all this money to build infrastructure, but if you can't connect to the grid, like I said, there's a big timeline between when we're starting to build this infrastructure and when these communities can be islanded and be their own utilities, have their own utilities, or be microgrids, for example. There are, what I'd love for the audience to know is there needs to be attention and investment made on this problem. It's the biggest downside right now. There's downsides to renewables. People talk about mining of, the essential and earth minerals, and, how do you recycle them? There's solutions to that stuff. What we don't have a solution to is the stalled public policy, the blatant racism that happens within utilities and their suppliers. It comes down from the top. Energy Foundation has just put $500,000 in our coffers to identify to sort of research this and identify those roadblocks, who is causing them, and how to burst that open, examine it, and fix it. Because otherwise, it is not a just transition. Otherwise, all that money coming out of the federal government gets hit against the wall. And you have a situation like we had with a particular array that was philanthropically donated, but the principle applies. When you put an array in place that's been federally, philanthropically, or personally funded, and the offtake rate is PERPA, that minimum 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and you're getting charged for the energy back that you put this energy into the grid, and then these utilities are charging homeowners and businesses in the neighborhood double or triple or 7 times, as is the case up on Standing Rock, for that energy. That's wrong. That's the big problem. And I bet you Arturo has it too.
Yeah, well, similar issues down here in Puerto Rico. In our case, our public utility was privatized recently, and from being bad before, now is worse. And what is happening is that their business, since the transmission and distribution of power had been privatized, their business model is to sell energy to the people. And we're promoting people to produce their own energy. So there's a conflict. There's in their business model with what we're promoting and let's say what is happening with the utility. So it is an ongoing battle. The government is saying, yes, you should engage in producing your own energy, but they're talking about taxation to the sun, for example, to get people scared to think about investing if something is going to happen in the future. They're putting like installation requirements that they are not. I mean, perhaps in New York, but in Puerto Rico, they don't apply, making things more complicated, more expensive. And yet what they want to do is build solar farms. And why a coal power plant has to use thousands of acres of Puerto Rico to plant solar panels when we have plenty of roof surfaces to install all the necessary power for the island. Why not the public utility investing in transforming their bunker, their petroleum central power plant to solar? I mean, that technology is relatively easy to deploy and install. It should be owned somehow by Puerto Rican utility or by the people or communities for here. So we are confronting different conflicts, contradictions. A lot of money will be allocated for Puerto Rico. The question is for what and for whom, and that battle is happening right now, and we need to confront that with the alternative of creating models in which people get the direct benefits of producing their own power and creating that as the reference of what should be done in the island. So that's an ongoing discussion here in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. And I think this might be a great time to take on one of our audience questions, which is about what specific policies are you trying to change or implement that will improve access to community and distributed energy? Yesenia?
All right, my mic did not want to unmute. As I mentioned earlier, we have the problem that community solar is not the law of the land in every single one of our states and territory, and that is unacceptable, especially with the IRA creating so many incentives for community solar itself. We need to make sure that everybody and anybody that wants to access clean energy has that access. And right now, there are still too many barriers to solar adoption. We need to start by making sure that everyone can have access to community solar and that it is easier for developers, for communities, and even homeowners to access that grid to interconnect their systems. But also, like Chéri was saying, when you do access the grid, when you do build these systems, then you're generating more than you use. These utilities still charging you for that. They still want to charge a minimum bill. You saw it in Virginia not too long ago, where Virginia actually passed a real community solar bill, the Share Solar Act, but left open the minimum bill requirement up to Dominion's discretion. Dominion came back with a $75 minimum bill. Who exactly is going to sign up for community solar if the minimum bill is $75? So we need to address problems like that. It is going to require a policy solution. This is not just about us protesting and us talking. It's like our policymakers, our lawmakers need to step in and make sure that everyone has access equitably and fairly to clean energy.
Yes, it is everything Yesenia just said. And then in tribal communities, we're trying for tribal utility commissions, much like the PUCs in each state, to have some clout and sort of use that sovereignty as a lever to get fair policy. We also are pushing for transparency. There's so much that's not known about the way rates are set. And we see the evidence on the bills in our communities where, a home on Standing Rock is paying 11.5, 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and the home off res just down the line of the non-native, family is paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and there's zero reason for that. And so we need resources to be able to, open up that open those padlocks and have some a glimpse into this world that has been led by rich white guys that sit on the boards of big energy companies, and it's time that go away.
I will say that pretty much the same of above. In our case, we're more using our energy and knowledge to build up through actions the references. I mean, what we're doing is what we think should be done in other municipalities and in Puerto Rico for energy independence. How that can be done through public policy. That discussion is happening. There's different things that needs to be addressed. But I think the important part is to go beyond proposals and ideas but building up the alternative as a real case scenarios. And we have seen it, and Casa Pueblo at least is being used as the opposite of the government failures managing Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Fiona. When you see all the failures in Puerto Rico, even though they have policy, even though they have resources, they have the economical, everything they need to do something different, yet there's a failure of responsibility. And by building up the alternative, at least we have references in Puerto Rico of alternative ways to address the issues of energy vulnerability and economic development. So we are more concentrated on building up the alternative and having those references available to be used in these more complex discussions on how to address the same questions in a broader scale.
With that being said, I am curious to hear from all of you or some of you, what, if any, new opportunities or avenues for funding do you see in the Inflation Reduction Act, and how are you thinking about that for your work? Chéri, I see you're very excited. Why don't we start with you?
We, for Indian country, This legislation is truly life-changing. It takes the most aggressive action on climate and clean energy in American history, and it provides funding specifically for tribes to plan for and adapt to climate change, mitigate drought, support fisheries, shift to clean energy production and use. And it's not perfect. Okay, it isn't perfect, but it finally puts a price on carbon at the federal level for the first time ever. And there are there's close to 70 provisions that impact tribes specifically. So we are pretty excited about this. And again, I know it's not perfect, and some communities are going to face downstream roadblocks like we will, and like Yesenia described earlier. But for the most part, we're applauding the federal government for finally taking action that is significant, and it's a good start, and it will put many of our tribal communities, it will completely change their trajectory, and it will become they can become energy self-sufficient with this as the starting place.
I can echo Chéri's sentiment. It is not a perfect bill. But it is a start, and there's some really good things in there when it comes to community solar. In particular for us, it's the nonprofit direct pay, which now gives the options for nonprofits that are developing community solar to access that 30% tax credit. And for our group in Boston, they were so excited. The second this bill became law, they are talking to lawyers, they're talking to experts on how can they organize, how can they register so they can benefit from that 30% tax credit, which automatically cuts down their cost of going solar, but still be able to pass down those benefits to the community. So it is a game changer. The fact that now you have nonprofits that do not have to go looking out for tax equity flips, that do not have to bring in tax investors, because they can now access that 30% directly, which means that if more money in their pockets serve the community, it is a big deal. And we are very much looking forward to seeing what happens with that portion of the IRA. But like I said, the fight's not over. Unfortunately, single family homes do not have access, low to moderate income families do not have access to that tax credit. So there's still a lot of work left to be done. But we are excited with what's passed and the options, not just the IRA and the incentives from the tax credit, but also the grants, the EJ funding that's in the bill. We're looking forward to seeing what the communities can do with this incentives and what they'll able to build and how they can start changing the equation and taking control of their energy systems.
That sounds good. I am the biologist of the group, so I'm not much about laws and legislation. What I can tell you is that in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Congress has announced multiple times, thousands of millions of dollars for the island energy reconstruction. Today, another one, $5,000 million for rooftop solars. But they're all promises. I mean, these are government saying, "Oh, all of this money," but you don't see it. You don't see that happening or impacting Puerto Rico directly. I know we're getting close to midterm elections and things like that, so promises are more common. In the case of Casa Pueblo, we everything we do is without money or funding from the local government or from the federal government. It's something that has to do with our mission to break the model of dependency. So it has to be bottom up. And that's why we work with Alex Honnold, solidarity from others, donations, and other alternatives. But we do understand that we need resources to make this available for everyone and good policies to help everyone in the community. So we'll see.
Right. And one of the things that we have been talking about through here, sorry, Chéri, did you have something to add?
I was going to say, this is a complex topic, and what Yesenia was talking about with the direct pay provisions, they're really complicated. I'm moderating a webinar tomorrow, and if anybody's interested in it, they can send me an email and I'll get the link to them. You can send it to me at info@indigenized.energy. What's really significant about what Yesenia was talking about, this direct pay, is that for the first time, tax exempt entities, nonprofits, that includes tribes, can take advantage of that 30% investment tax credit that's been available to for-profits since the dawn of, since back in the Obama administration. So the way that comes to the nonprofits, because they're tax exempt, is that they file a tax return at the end of the year, and because they don't have any liability, they get a rebate. So in certain communities, you not only have the 30% ITC, you get adders for other things, like, are you building on tribal lands? That's 10%. Are you using the bulk US manufactured materials? That's another 10%. Are you building in a clean energy zone, which is what they deem where fossil fuel has abandoned the region and left people with no jobs? And there's actually, you can get 60 to 70% back. So that means if you build a $1 million project and you qualify for all of these adders, you could get a check for $700,000 back. So this is huge, and we're going to be talking about it as it relates to tribes, but it also relates to the world at large, the country at large, in that webinar with the Department of Energy tomorrow.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Chéri. And we've been talking about power by the people, right? You all are focused on building capacity from the grassroots. I am curious to hear more about that jobs aspect. How are you seeing the job generation and workforce training within the community, and also how it relates to the long-term care and maintenance of these systems, because that's huge, right? And it's something that needs to be there. So how are you thinking about that aspect in the long term and right now also?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the community is really focused on making sure that this is not just about reducing their electric bill, that this is about changing the community's lives in general. This is about wealth building, and especially generational wealth. So they are looking at ways that when we develop the project, who gets to work on these projects? Where is the project sited? Who gets to benefit from it? Because we want to see these as better paying jobs. We want to see these as livable wages. And you have to be very deliberate when it comes to workforce development, when it comes to making sure that we diversify our solar workforce and our green workforce, because we can talk about it and it sounds great, but if we're not deliberate, if we're not taking those steps from the very beginning, from when we're designing these projects, then it's just that. It's all just nice talk. So the community is being intentional about these questions and thinking ahead in how are they going to implement this, and working with other groups that can bring in those folks and make sure that it's not just this one time working on this one project, but that we are giving these folks skills so they can make a living out of installing solar. And not just installation, because you can get on the roof and those jobs may be a little bit easier, but I think we want to be intentional about every aspect of solar development, like from the sales aspect to the engineering side to the designing side. There are so many other jobs in solar and clean energy than just getting on the roof and installing panels, which is hard work. Trust me, especially in a hot summer day when you're on those roofs, putting on those panels, it is not an easy job. But we have a lot more in the solar field to offer than just getting on the rooftops, and everybody should be able to access those jobs, from the installers all the way up to the C-suite, and we have to be intentional and deliberate about it so that we can change. And as you were saying, in the future, there's a lot going on, not just with installing systems, but we're going to see a lot of retrofits. We are going to see a lot of electrification, and we need to make sure that everyone has access to those jobs, and those jobs are high-paying jobs, that they're paying a livable wage, that they come with benefits. It's really hard to tell folks in coal country that are working in these coal mines to step away from that and start working in solar when you're asking them to step away from a union job with guarantees and benefits. So we need to make sure that we are offering those same options in green jobs in solar.
Ditto. As Yesenia was talking, I put a link in the chat to the solar career map, which was, I was proud to have been involved in the creation of the original version of that, going back now like 8-10 years ago. It's been modified, and it does what Yesenia was mentioning. It's a really cool interactive tool that shows you all of the different jobs within renewable solar specifically, but it applies to any renewables. There's jobs across the board. You don't have to be on a roof. My son is a solar installer. He's like, Mom, this is not for the faint of heart. It isn't. But you can be an accountant for the solar industry as well, and you make great money, and you get to stay dry and warm or cold. So check that out, the solar career map. For a marginalized community specifically, and tribe, Indian country, and everywhere else, there is an issue with renewables being built by outsiders, and it's when you're building a project and you import labor, and then the system is owned mostly by the developer, and the tribe or the community gets a tiny little benefit. That's exploitive and extractive. Renewables can be just as extractive, and so workforce development by the people for the people is essential if we are going to have a just transition. It's not an option. It has to happen. So financially, the impact of the jobs, labor is the biggest cost of most solar projects. So by employing tribal members, there's an immediate and direct economic impact that's often far greater than the impact of the solar itself. So there's that for tribes to consider, but it's also about empowering people. And I will tell you that I hear more often than I would like to admit from our young solar warrior trainees that they were in despair. They had lost hope, and that these jobs are more than money, and it's about hope. And these young men and women telling me and my team, that they were thinking of committing suicide until this came to town, and now they see a path for themselves. That's what we're talking about here, folks. It goes that deep.
In our case, we have been working with different installers, and what we have seen is now it's a local company that has retrained 6 people from the community, and what you see is that the support that people get when the installers are local is way different when it's done from outside. I think in our case, the power generation with solar is easy, straightforward. The energy storage component is the weakest part, and it's very expensive. And because we cannot rely on the central utility to be the backup, the energy storage part, because the power failures here are too often, and we're at risk of earthquakes and hurricanes. It's like energy storage is very critical, and that technology needs to improve. We have confronted difficulties with some of the installations. We have been supporting communities to upgrade people that needs to upgrade their systems. But in the case of the Adjuntas microgrid, what we're doing with the business owners is that they're going to be paying for the energy to themselves, and that money that they will be paying to themselves because they're producing collectively power on their different rooftops of their businesses. Part of that will be for operation and maintenance. Part of that will be for an emergency fund if something breaks down, to have the resources in place to respond immediately, and half of the resources will be to help low-income families also reach energy security. So energy as a way to drive the transition, not only with outside in contributions, but generating wealth from within to help the transformation to continue in a more sustainable fashion.
That's fascinating, that model for maintenance and kind of a cooperative chipping in for that. So we are almost at time, which sounds crazy because I could talk to you for hours. We have been talking a lot about clean energy as a vehicle for broader social change. I think all of you have brought up that idea through your answers to these questions. I'd love to end it on a little bit of visioning, if you will indulge me. Tell us what the community looks like if your vision is realized and you're successful in what you're trying to achieve. And Yesenia, we can start with you again.
I would say it's a community that's independent, that has built wealth, and that has taken control over their energy system. If we are successful, we're not just going to swap out renewable energy for fossil fuel, because as Chéri said, it can still be extractive. If we are successful, we're going to revolutionize the energy system and create one where everyone gets to benefit from their energy source and gets the energy they need to benefit their communities and their lives in general.
And I'm going to just keep going from Yesenia's sentence, because that's exactly it, right? And what we're left with is vibrant and revitalized communities that are self-sufficient and not dependent on the colonial capital patriarchal constructs that put them in this position in the first place.
And by doing so, we'll have a better way of life, better well-being for everyone, not just for a few. And in our case, we'll be good in a better position during good days and better prepared to confront and to rebound from hurricanes and other natural events that we have to live with in the Caribbean. So thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to be here.
That was beautiful, almost as if you guys had rehearsed that answer together. But thanks everyone so much for joining us, and thank you three for taking the time to be here. You can learn more about their work at canarymedia.com. As we mentioned, we had this week's series on Power by the People. It's still ongoing, and you can also read our coverage on Puerto Rico's solar boom. This is a bilingual series, so you can read it both in English and in Spanish, reported by my colleague Maria Gallucci. We'll be posting the links in the chat. A final reminder that we are a nonprofit, so if you value our work, we would love your support either through reading our work, signing up for the newsletter, or donations. So I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day and your week.